Hey, what up? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tonic podcast. I am Alex Kapitko, and I'm joined with my friend and co-host Drew Nepley. We both met at Chapman University. Oh man, going on, geez, 7 years ago, I think, if I'm not incorrect. And
Yeah, wow.
since then, we always joked about making, yeah, right. Like it's kind of wild. Like time flies, and it's kind of cool to see that we're still having fun talking about politics this far removed from our freshman dorm. You know what I mean?
Um, all right. I mean, should we bring it up to how we should we go to another person that just lost power, Netanyahu?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So Benjamin Netanyahu has been ousted. Israeli politics is something that I need to brush up on a lot more. But it seems that like the coalitions of governments in their parliament could have to come to agreement on a prime minister. And for a while, Benjamin Netanyahu was able to keep enough coalition of parties to keep him in power. But just recently, and only by one vote in the parliament, he was just ousted. And he's actually going to be replaced by someone that used to work for him. Shoot, what is his name? Um,
Naftali Bennett.
yeah, yes. Um, So Naftali Bennett, right? Naftali Bennett is someone who I think used to be like one of his main campaign managers or secretary or media secretaries for Netanyahu back in the day, but now he's almost carved out his own political career. He was able to form a coalition that ranged from some mid right politicians to left leaning politicians, all the way to an Arab representative, which is not easy to do in Israeli politics. And so he was able to scrounge up enough political clout to basically form a new government and be entrusted with the prime minister position. Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to come back very soon. He also claims fraud, and it's certainly a massive change because Benjamin Netanyahu has been the head of prime minister of Israel for over a decade, and has certainly had a very nationalistic defensive policies. However, Naftali Bennett has also been pretty far right on some of Israel's defense policies. So it's interesting to see him come up with a coalition that I think will probably crumble pretty soon. What do you think, Alex?
It's not going to work. That's just my first take, and I'll explain why in a second. But I think that the world is, especially people that were not fans of Netanyahu, are excited. It's they had 4 elections in 2 years because just a coalition against Netanyahu could never be made. The coalition, which, like you mentioned, Bennett is actually further right than Netanyahu on a myriad of issues.
Yeah.
And Abbas is the leader of this Arab group who also is in the coalition. And then there's a guy named Lapid who is quite left on other issues. And so the only thing this group is unified in is hating Netanyahu. And yeah, that works to hate Netanyahu. But what happens when they start talking about the actual like main issue that has been kind of the focus on Netanyahu for the last couple of years, which is settlements? And settlements is the first problem because Bennett actually was, I think he was a governor or I didn't know, was a politician for one of these West Bank settlements. He actually lived in some of these taken settlements from Palestinians and Arabs. And so
Jeez.
he's actually said, let me see. He said Bennett and Lapid, who's the left one in this coalition, indicated that change won't extend to any policy shift on Israeli-Palestinian issues.
Right.
And yeah, Bennett, who's 49, will be the first prime minister in the past who has lived in a Jewish settlement in the occupied West Bank, and that is from Foreign Policy magazine. And so my issue is that there's something interesting about Netanyahu. Is that I don't like him. I think he's way too right wing kind of nationalist. But the thing is that under him, and I didn't know this till I read a great New York Times article yesterday, is that he actually has kept Israel out of conflict, and he's the only leader of Israel that has kept them out of what you would call a war. Now, obviously, there's been infadadas and other violent conflicts that have happened under his watch, but he actually is associated with a lot of Israelis as a defender of Israel. And so the problem is that he's actually kept somewhat stability while past leaders haven't. And people are worried that someone like Bennett, who actually has more nationalist views than even Netanyahu, might actually lead to a new conflict. And that is one thing that obviously is too early to tell, and that would divide this coalition. And basically, like you said, it was one vote that got this coalition into power. And if they divide on anything, then it could be over.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, he has that reputation of being the defender of Israel. That's like, his main thing. I mean, he gains popularity in the polls anytime Israel is attacked by Hamas. And I think that to expect, like, one is the first point, is to expect a massive change in policy regarding Palestine with Bennett is naive. I don't think that's going to happen. They've already said that's pretty much not going to happen, which does mean his coalition, especially the Arab representative, might be strained. However, like you also mentioned, that the coalition exists in as an antithesis, as an anti-Netanyahu thing. As Netanyahu has said, he's going to fight back super hard. He's going to be back soon. Perhaps an interesting analysis I heard from a reporter in Israel was that there is a possibility that because Netanyahu was going to be so probably very loud and boisterous and angry at this and be like, campaigning to come back as quick as possible, that his activity might glue the coalition together for a time, right? Like, let's say Netanyahu's gone and just retires, then the coalition probably will break down very soon because of the very obvious differences that are there to begin with. However, if Netanyahu is still very loud and boisterous and active in politics, which I very much guarantee he will be, there is a chance that the coalition might just keep that glue together, similar to the idea of, Trump continuing his political thing. It might be bad for Republicans because Democrats can stay unified against him, whereas without Trump, then all the cracks show between progressives and moderates, right? Same thing here. Perhaps maybe because of Netanyahu, the coalition stays together. But you're right. I think the big test is the next time we see violence in Gaza, the next time we see some real shit hit the fan again. Bennett is going to be tested to defend Israel. It'd be political suicide not to, and then boom, there his coalition is going to be really strained among the more left-leaning sides. So I don't think it's going to be a radical change, but perhaps it might be a slow cooling of Israel's nationalism. Who we'll see.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really hope you're right, and I think the biggest takeaway that I've been kind of reading all over was that kind of the big straw that broke Netanyahu's back was that usually his rhetoric involving Palestine or other enemies like Iran, for example, involved like foreign issues, right? Like he never started an international conflict, for example, but he sent Mossad into Iran many times, and I think the difference, though, for a lot of Israelis was seeing Arab and Jewish Israelis beating each other up on the streets over the last month. And this was this kind of new chaos that I think was a lot different than previous times. And so I think you're right in a way, is that maybe this could hold the coalition together, because right now I read that Netanyahu's already having allies out on the streets, tormenting some of these coalition members. He wants the mob. He's definitely taken some playbooks out of Trump's, like, I don't think Trump reads, but I guess we could say playbook. But it does seem like Netanyahu could actually be helpful in keeping this coalition together. Now the one optimistic thing I will say is that I keep seeing this all over the place. The New York Times mentioned it, and so did the Atlantic. 80% of Israelis agree on the majority of issues. It's that small 20% that divides them. And so this coalition actually could do a lot of good things involving healthcare and education specifically. I didn't know this because I assumed Israel had good education. I don't know why, but it turns out that Israel has one of the worst education systems in the world for a developed nation. And
Wow.
so they could work on that. It's not the sexy stuff, but it's the stuff that they could do to, like, at least fix the tangibles, kind of infrastructure-esque type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that is at the end of the day what most governing is not the sexy
Right.
stuff. So yeah, hopefully they can get to work on that. But it's a coalition that's on very thin ice. That's for sure.